Hey guys, today we are going to tackle the powerful force nostalgia is when we're buying and collecting sports cards and collectibles, and I'm going to share some of my items and the stories behind why I bought those items, why I collect them. Make sure to stick around. Hello to all my sports card collectors, investors, all of my collectibles friends. We are going to have fun here today. It's kind of a little bit of a different twist on a sports card video today, but I'm going to have fun doing this one. A lot of the nostalgic stuff we are going to hit on. Before we get started, please hit the big red button, the subscribe button below if you're new here. Also, if you like what you hear, the like button, it helps kind of get these videos out to all of the sports card collectibles people that are searching for this stuff. And also, don't forget to connect with me on IG at Sports Card Dad, and I'm also on the Twitter, the Sports Card Dad. All right, I was born in 1981, which actually makes me a young Gen Xer or a really old millennial. I'm kind of a tweener, right in between. I can't find a home. I don't have an identity. Actually, I think there is a name maybe for the in-betweeners, but I don't remember exactly what it is. But I had the benefit of being able to grow up partly in the 80s, in the late 80s, and then also in the 90s. So I've got the nostalgia from all of that stuff. I feel very fortunate because I basically grew up through the two best decades of all time. I know I'm kind of building this up really. I'm building it up big time. But I really think that is the case, especially when it comes to pop culture and the importance of the brands and the IP that were built during the 80s and the 90s. And what other proof do you need other than the fact that they just keep on remaking all the stuff from the 80s and from the 90s?
This is the coolest thing I have ever seen.
And some would say, well, every generation has got this. You know, you've got people that, the 50s and black and white TV and movies, that's their thing. And, you've got the 60s and the 70s. Of course, you had different pop culture elements back then. But there's a huge difference. There's really a huge difference in my mind between those eras and then when you get into the 80s and the 90s when really mass commercialized product was being sold, whether we're talking about He-Man or Thundercats. Or G.I. Joe, all the stuff that was coming out during the 80s and all the movies. They took a lot of chances on movies, just a lot of innovation going on, a lot of new characters. And the same goes, it just continued on into the 90s. And this is what I think is a differentiator between those two decades and what we've seen before and since, frankly. It was just an absolute barrage of pop culture awesomeness that has come out of those two decades, and it still continues on, and I don't think it's going to stop. And so what has the result of that been? What is the result of those particular decades been for people? And it's been that they're getting back into collectibles, and there's all sorts of different types of options for them. I'm going to show some of the items that I've got, and it's a variety of different things. And I'm just going to kind of tell stories of what they mean to me and why they are important. And at the very end, I'll kind of circle all the way back as to why I think that collectibles have ultimate importance in people's lives. All right, let's get started. All right, first we're going to start with a couple of graded comic books. This is the first Simpsons comic book, and then also Beavis and Butthead #1. Now, for a lot of people, you're going to say, Beavis and Butthead was literally the dumbest show ever created, and you wouldn't be wrong. You wouldn't be wrong by thinking that or saying that, but for me, it was summers spending with my dad in Virginia. We would go visit him, and we had kind of summer TV. We'd go to the pool, and really, a lot of what dominated was MTV music videos, and Beavis and Butthead happened to be a part of that whole story. So as dumb as those shows were, and granted, when I go back and watch them now, they are dumb, but even just the intro music to it, I think it was Mike Judge was the guy's name that created it. He did a bunch of the voices. He also did the King of the Hill stuff. It was just funny, and it was really, really well done. As dumb as it was just part of the importance of my summers as a middle schooler and a teenager, and played into the era with, AC/DC and Nirvana and Pearl Jam Jam and Stone Temple Pilots and all the alternate rock bands that were popular during the time. As far as The Simpsons goes, same story. I remember there was one particular episode, it was a season ender, where it was Who Shot JR, and it was a play on the old Dallas show, Who Shot JR, or Who Shot Mr. Burns, and it was a play on Who Shot JR from the old Dallas show in the 80s. And I remember talking to my friends all summer trying to figure out like who actually shot Mr. Burns. The Simpsons is one of those kind of shows too. It was always there, and I think it still is going, all these seasons later, all these years later. But again, that was another show that was just, it was always there. It was always funny. I loved all the Halloween specials that they did. I actually look forward to the Halloween specials just as much as actually going out and trick-or-treating and doing all of that stuff. So The Simpsons was an important show for me growing up, along with, even though, Beavis and Butthead, it wasn't like I was, snickering like those guys and pretending to be them, but I just remember it as part of that kind of summer routine that my brother and I watching those shows and cracking up. So, and those comic books were out during that time as well. This was the early 90s. A lot of you might remember starting lineups. So this one in particular, I believe that this is the rookie for Favre. Yeah, okay, so this is the first Brett Favre starting lineup from 1994. And I thought, this is kind of cool that they're grading these now. AFA is kind of the main action figure grading company. And starting lineups were huge back then. You'd go to Walmart. Target really wasn't a thing when I was growing up. It was more Walmart and Kmart. And the fun part was always going there and just checking out the aisle to see if there was a new one or, either like a Michael Jordan or a rare one. There's like old like Utah Jazz starting lineups that were really hard to find. So, depending on your area, what region you were in, you would see all these different types of players. And then there were some that you would see all the time that were always there in stock. And then there would be kind of that, that off one, or you'd see, there's a Larry Bird or a Magic Johnson or something. And it would be cool to pick those up. And they were just fun to collect starting lineups. And I just heard that they're bringing those back. Fanatics, I believe, has got starting lineups that they're going to be offering online. So that's a huge nostalgia thing for me. It was just growing up. I remember it would be a big treat to go to Toys R Us that had, like Walmart, Kmart had their starting lineups, and you go to Toys R Us and there was just so much more, to choose from at the Toys R Us. So starting lineups are just kind of a mainstay, from that late 80s, early 90s. They started, I believe, 1988 was the first starting lineups, 87, 88, I believe it was 88 though, and they carried it through the 90s. So, and Brett Favre and the Packers, Antonio Freeman and those guys, I would root for them because my team, the New Orleans Saints, just wasn't a perennial playoff contender. So I would always pull for the Packers to beat the Cowboys in the 90s. All right, next, one of, if not my favorite PC card, at least right now, and it's the flawless Drew Brees auto, 100 years, and it is the black box 1 of 1 from the National. So going back to 2021, it was last year's National in Chicago. This one has special significance to me because obviously, it's Drew Brees, took my team to the promised land with Sean Payton. Might not ever happen again, but this was a team that had never been to a Super Bowl, never really been deep into the playoffs, and Brees and Payton really put the Saints on the map. And then this also was my first national card convention that I went to, so it kind of all comes full circle with this particular card. And then it's flawless. It's just a nice auto, just a great card. So, just being a longtime Saints fan, my Drew Brees PC, is something that I look to as just, it's a feel good story. It's always, good to kind of go through those cards. Just like a lot of us have PCs of different players that bring certain memories, different things to us. All right, this is the original Super Mario Brothers on the original NES that came out in 1986, 1987. I didn't get mine until, I believe it was Christmas 1989. It was either Christmas 1988 or Christmas 1989. I think it was 1989 though. And I remember it came with Mario Brothers and Duck Hunt. And I think it's hilarious because my 7-year-old now plays this game still on the mini NES. And I think he also can play it on his Switch as well. But, just the importance of this game to my life. And then actually just in pop culture history, when you go back to just video game history, kind of the beginnings, of course you had Atari and you had a lot of the cool PC games that were coming up on Apple. We also had a Commodore 64 computer that we played games on. But the NES was really just way ahead of its time. This was you had kind of the Atari debacle with, software, the ET stuff that just bombed. And then you kind of had the video game console world just fell apart really in 83, 84, 85 timeframe. And then Nintendo came out with this incredible 8-bit system, the original NES that I can actually remember getting this for Christmas, being so excited. I ran to the phone that was on the wall. It was a landline, believe it or not, with a cord and everything. And I called my best buddy, Alan Neubauer, who lived right down the street. And we were talking about, he actually got one as well. He got like Castlevania to go with his, so that was such a huge deal back in my day. Nowadays, when you look at video games, all the different options, it's not that big of a deal, but man, back then that was really kind of as video games were getting started and getting going. So owning this piece, it's a WATA graded original NES. It's the CIB version, complete in box. For me, I just look up at that. It's in my office, and it just kind of brings me back, to those childhood days where you just did nothing but run around outside, throwing the football in the summertime, riding bikes with your buddies, going down to the gas station to get a pack of cards and Big League Chew, a Slurpee maybe, and that was really kind of your life. And you played Nintendo, played sports outside. That was life. So the nostalgic power of pop culture from the 80s and 90s drives so much of collectibles now, and bring a wide swath of collectibles. And I think that is so important to remember, because on the channel we talk a lot about price points and business things and different things that are very enjoyable. And that really, honestly, that started way back when I was a kid getting Beckett magazines. I really enjoyed collecting the cards, but I also really enjoyed going to the price guide and saying like, oh wow, Bubby Brister, 10 cents or whatever, that was fun. That was fun to do as a kid. And I was one of those weird kids too, that was looking in like not the yellow pages, in the newspaper, the classifieds, and pretending like I got with my allowance and buying a car, saving up and buying this or buying that. I had kind of a business mind as a kid. So I really, really enjoyed kind of tying in the values with the cards. I always enjoyed the cards, still do. And man, it's advanced tremendously. There was nothing like this in 1987. There wasn't. Now, a lot of the vintage collectors will say like, hey, we don't need that garbage. We've got this, we have our vintage cards. That's fine. I've got a lot of vintage cards myself. If you watch me, you know that I really appreciate the history of cards. I love a lot of that newer stuff and kind of how it's progressed along. I also really enjoy where it's all come from. It's come from the cardboard. It came from, cigar packs, cigarette packs going way, way back. And so tying this all together for me, the nostalgia is for me, it's being able to hold on to memories. And I think that is so important because, I've been around people now that, as I'm aging up, I'm around folks that have, dementia, Alzheimer's, or I'm hearing these types of stories, and they're losing time, they're losing their memories. And then once you kind of lose that, it's scary because, it's got to be hard for your own identity, figuring out like, who am I? How did I grow up? Who are these people around me? And I think that these types of items and always kind of looking back at them, there are people that will say like, hey man, look to the present and the future. Don't worry about the past. The past is not something to look back on and be upset about or, constantly stress about, but it can really be a piece of joy. It's not that, I wish that it was 1985 again. I enjoy the present, but I also appreciate kind of where we've all come from and how as a society we've kind of moved through and how things kind of circle back, and that's what we talk about here. A lot of things, circle back to the 80s, to the 90s, and there's a lot of joy from that. And I think it's holding on to these memories. These items help us to hold on to childhood memories, whether good or bad, or actually a lot of this stuff helps you kind of get through traumas, helps you get through kind of the bad times from childhood. A lot of times maybe you didn't have a great upbringing, but man, you remember getting those 89 Donruss packs of baseball cards every weekend. I remember I would go fishing with my dad on Saturday mornings. We'd go onto the Air Force Base, and they had a little shopette there. And his thing when he was a kid is he would get RC Colas and a moon pie. That was something that he would get, growing up. So I would do the same thing because I wanted to be like him. And then he would also get me, the shopette also had baseball cards, so I'd get a pack of, baseball cards and try to get like Bo Jackson Diamond Kings or Ken Griffey Jr. Diamond Kings out of those packs. So again, it's a lot of it is just tying, memories together. It's bringing it all full circle. And that is something that, I think that it's important to talk about because a lot of times it's just markets are up and markets are down, which cards are worth buying for the long term. And I talk about this a lot myself because I have interest in it, but I also don't want to forget what got me here in the first place. Why am I here? Why am I doing this? And this is the type of video that is kind of part of that purpose and part of that reasoning. Guys, tell me your stories in the comments. If you do have nostalgic stories, did you grow up collecting cards with your parents, with your dad? Or is it something you have buddies that you did it with? Is there something that drew you in that's kept you here? Or are you brand new to it? Maybe you don't have those memories or that nostalgia. And maybe, hey, you're just like, you're new into this hobby and learning to, enjoy cards the way that they are now, and then kind of learning about the history of cards. It all works. All of it is good. So let me know those stories in the comments below. Stay healthy, stay awesome, and I will talk to you again later.